Anyway, I just had a couple of funny things. Well, is it okay? Where's Esther? Is it okay if I retell the one I did? That was one of my favorites. Since we're having some big windy weather today, I was had scheduled the plane to fly my daughter and her friend over to her friend's father's home in Wapakoneta, and when I got up and looked, there was this squall line in western Indiana that was just, I mean, it went from Canada to the Gulf, so it was it was going to be impossible. So I went out, and I didn't want to cancel the airplane because it was going to be a long time before it got there. I had time, so I went out and did some touch and goes, and I stayed at the airport. I asked the guy, since I wouldn't be in touch with flight following or whatever, that I just asked the tower if they would keep me, up on what was going on with the weather. And I told them I was aware of it, and they said sure. And I started doing touch and goes, and I was ready. I could see the sky just getting blacker and blacker, And I knew. They told me it was still over by Indianapolis, but it was, that's how bad it was. It was getting black here already. So I determined I was going to land the next one. And I hear this guy in a Piper come out and ask for clearance to take off. And he gave his direction is southwest. And I'm thinking, what an idiot. What does he think he's doing? But anyway, he proceeded, and the tower even said, which they don't usually do, are you aware of the weather situation? And he said, yes, I have the ATIS, and I'm aware of the weather. And so they cleared him to take off, and he was doing everything by the book, all sounding very pilot-y, And he took off, and I had to do another circuit because of all this that was dealing with him. And it's kind of good that I did, because I got to hear him. He took off, and I saw him. I was on the north runway. He was taking off on the main one, and all of a sudden I hear this little voice that says, "Can I come back?" It was the funniest thing. And of course the tower comes back, and they're still being very professional. Saying, that's affirmative, blah blah blah. And do a left turn to so much heading and so forth. But it was just hilarious to just hear him, just collapse when he saw that enormous cloud. And let's see, I had another one, again, weather. I was doing my instrument training, and we knew the weather was a little bit sketchy, but I was under the hood and did my, maneuvers and stuff. And of course I wasn't seeing anything, and my instructor was watching it all, but this was a case where there were thunderstorms that were about to come, but they weren't embedded for once. They weren't, you could see them, and that's unusual here. And so anyway, he said, I think we're going to head back now, take off your hood. And I took off the hood, and I saw a bolt of lightning. It was way away, but that's what the first thing that happened, and I said, oh shit. And he started to laugh, and he said, yeah, later told me he was glad I had that reaction, because he knew I wasn't going to be messing around with the weather in any irresponsible way. But then later he told me that he actually started telling all his students that they shouldn't go flying in no shit weather. So, so that was, and the only other little thing I had was that I don't know how many of you fly out of controlled airports, but I did all my training and everything at Port Columbus, John Glenn. And when you're, I remember one time, the controllers are usually very, very good. And I remember one time when a pilot was getting kind of irritable, and the controller got irritable back. Oh my. And the next voice I heard was not good. So they took him out just like that. Wow. And so one time I was taxiing around and finishing a lesson, and I was taxiing around, and I heard this exchange going on, and there was a pilot being really stinky with somebody, and he wanted I think the controller, maybe just to get his goat, cleared me to taxi
Oh my.
in front of him
Oh my.
to my place because he was just being a real jerk. And my instructor said, just tell him thank you. And I knew you weren't supposed to do, banter between airplanes when you're on with the ground control. But I said, and he said, just do it. So I'm taxiing under, and back then, when I was taking lessons, 747s and L-1011s used, they aren't doing that now, but I was always in mix of traffic with them. And I don't know which it was, I think it was an L-1011, but I was pretty much looked like a cartoon, this little airplane creeping along under the nose of this giant airplane. And so I picked up the mic and said, thanks, big guy. And this super sweet voice came back and said, anytime, little lady. But it defused the situation, which was kind of neat, and my instructor knew what he was doing to have me say something to him directly, which he normally wouldn't do, but it was just so funny. So those are my stories, and somebody else said that I do
something like that.
What? I never intended to fly an airplane. I thought flying an airplane would be the securest thing you could ever do. My sister-in-law took lessons, and she started flying. So she took me up one time. I thought, well, if she can do this, at least I can learn how to land an airplane. Well, I learned to land an airplane. By this time I had instrument rating, flew many hours, and I don't fly anymore, but I love flying. I encourage you, all of you. That's all.
Thanks.
Okay. We started flying back again my second time because a daughter went to Venezuela with me. And we went into the Venezuelan Amazon with Missionary Aviation Fellowship. She came back and said, Dad, that's what I want to do. So he figuratively patted her on the head and said, sure, honey, and thinking next week you want to be a fireman or a policeman or whatever else. She was 12, I believe,
12?
at the time.
Oh my.
And then when she got to be 16, she had the money. She said, do you think he'll really do it, or was it just something to say? Well, I said, no, I think he'll do it. So they got back in. Now, I had my pilot certificate when I was 17, and it had been a long time. Money, poverty, babies, that takes you out of the cockpit.
Yeah.
So they got back in, one would fly, the other would watch and not make the mistakes the first one did,
dear,
then they'd
that's
switch.
rough.
So they got their certificates together on the same day in 2006. At the end of that year, we were looking at buying a plane, and that was the first time when we went up and we got that. The seller took me up, and I was promptly petrified.
Oh dear.
How do you do this? And I thought, well, I used to do it. Why can't I do it now? Well, we bought the plane, and they were going off and doing trips to Carrollton and getting pie and
yes.
getting,
Oh, yeah.
going to the Bluebird over
Oh, yeah.
Carrollton
Oh,
at the
absolutely.
time and doing all these wonderful things. I thought, doggone it, we're not going to own a plane that I can't fly. So I had to take my documents and go to the FSDO and prove that I was who I said I was, which really made my husband happy, that I was who I thought I was. And
No.
then I got my new certificate, of course, the card. Before that, it was all the little paper one. And then I was starting to take lessons. I thought, well, I'm being a little sneaky. I should let my husband know what I'm doing. And so I let him, and he said, why were you trying to not tell me? Well, because I wanted to be a surprise.
Oh,
But
dear.
I got recertified in about 12 hours and I was going to go to a NIFA competition and be a judge and fly into a towered field when I hadn't even been in one in over 30 years. And my husband said, you ought to go back to your instructor and get that settled. So we went over to Mansfield and we landed and started taxiing, and all of a sudden my instructor jammed on the brakes and went, no. Why are you yelling at me? He says, you can't cross that line. Go just trot in there. Did you ever tell me that? Did we go over this? No. And I got angry, and I thought, man, that stinks. I think I could do better than this with instructing. I ended up getting my commercial, and then I got a scholarship through the 99s for the Amelia Earhart Scholarship for the CFI, and I had a dickens of a time getting through the CFI because there were all these Swiss cheese holes in my learning, and I kept thinking, someone hasn't done their job. So finally, I ended up getting my CFI, and I went from homeschooling my kids to teaching people flight. Then in 2013, we had a convention for our other job, the one that pays the bills and allows me to fly, out in Las Vegas. So Sam and I flew from our home all the way out to Las Vegas. And then, since we were so close to the West Coast,
Oh dear.
we flew down around the mountains and out to Salinas, California. So we went to the West Coast, and we have been to the East Coast. We have been down to Florida. We've gone to Sun and Fun. We've gone to Oshkosh. We've gone to Vermont. We've gone to Texas numerous times, and have really enjoyed flying together as a team. And there was a lot of learning curve there, because somehow in my mind I was in a competition with him,
Oh my.
and had to learn that we're not in competition, we're a team. So how do you say something that's not like, you did this wrong?
Oh dear.
You know, both ways. That went both ways. But we've had some really good experiences. As a flight instructor, that's a whole nother video. And I will save those stories for another time.
My husband got his private pilot about 10 years ago, and I was not a fan of flying with. I flew with him all the time, but I didn't like it. I just went with him because I was supporting him, and I was not a fan of Cessnas and just traditional airplanes and stuff. But we flew to Sun and Fun, and he was a pretty low time pilot. He literally just bought an RV4 like maybe 2 months before that. Wow. And I won't share our adventures on the way down, but on the way back, it was a beautiful day, and we kind of left late, and we left with another friend. It was another RV6, and we were kind of in tandem, like flying back from Dayton area, Springfield area, and it was beautiful and sunny and gorgeous, and it was the worst turbulent day ever. It was terrible. And our friend was with both of them are NetJets pilots, and she's a very high time captain, and they've all been in that stuff before. And she had autopilot, and they were behind us, and it was a good 2-hour leg, and it was the most miserable thing I've ever done in my life. I get motion sick in general. I mean, we were dropping and raising a couple hundred feet altitude, we hit our heads on the canopy of and they were just laughing because they had autopilot, and they were just watching us and they kept checking in on us. I'm like, yep, I'm great. And we didn't have a constant speed prop, and so my poor husband is just super overwhelmed trying to manage everything, and I'm trying to be a supportive wife behind him. He couldn't even take his hands off to put a seatbelt on tighter, so it was not very much fun. And we landed in Georgia somewhere for lunch, and I said, I'm not getting back on the plane. I'm getting a real car and I'm driving home. And we ended up going to lunch, and one of our friends actually flew our plane, and he rode with him, and I flew with my friend Terry, who's a NetJets pilot, and it was smooth as glass the whole way back. I was like, okay, but I was so over it. I was so upset, and I was like, okay, I'm done. But I was calm the entire time, but I wanted to, just lay on the ground and not move for the rest of the day. So that was my adventure. But needless to say, I'm still flying.
Early on in my training, and I remember it was a really rainy, just muggy day, so the ground was all soft. And my instructor and I were putting the plane away, so we're taxiing back, and I didn't notice, but I accidentally got one of the wheels stuck in the mud. And my instructor was like, okay, we're just gonna have to tell the chief. And I'm like, no, we can't tell the chief. And he's like, well, we can't pull it out ourselves. So we're both going out there, and I'm yanking with all my might, and somehow we pull it out. I'm wiping the mud off. I'm like, no one's gonna know anything. We're not gonna tell the chief under no circumstances. And because that took so much longer, we ended up driving back in the airport car. We got picked up, and so I met my friend Claire, and she was the first female student pilot that I've ever met. And so her and I just hit it off. And then I met her in the car, and the next day was the 99s meeting. So she was yeah, we were texting the night. She was like, do you want to come? And I was like, I just met you. Yeah, let's go. So that's how I got involved with the 99s.
That's good.
Because I met her, and then I loved it.
And where are you in the course you've trained?
I am working on my instrument rating right now.
Good deal.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay.
And then that's through Kent State. So I finished up my private at Wadsworth. And then I am a student at Kent State now for my freshman year. So now I fly there.
Yeah, and she's our first Wings
Yes.
scholarship winner.
Yay!
Anyway, in the last issue of the 99s magazine, I'm not going to talk about myself so much. I'm going to talk about Edna Gardner White. There is an article in there. Be sure to read about that.
Yeah.
She was something else. I encountered her years ago. Somehow I got tied up in being the stop chairman for the 50th commemorative race, which was that race that Amelia Earhart flew in 1929, and that's how our organization got started. So anyway, their stop was in Columbus, Ohio. And for some reason or the other, the guy who ran the Columbus airport at that time wouldn't let them stop there for the commemorative race because he said that the air controllers were too busy. Well, initially in the first one, they stopped at Columbus and then they ended up in Cleveland. So they said, but you can go to Bolton Field because we are the satellite airport for Port Columbus. So anyway, I got to meet Edna Gardner White here. She flew a Comanche 400 horsepower airplane. Wow. There was only 128 of those built. And she didn't own the airplane. Her co-pilot owned the airplane. So I got to talk to her and see her, and Columbus Dispatch did this big article on her. It says 77-year-old woman flies her 25th World Air Race.
That's fantastic.
So anyway, you can't see it now because there's too many of us, but there's a picture of me in the tower along with Marcia Greenham, so many of the people knew and so forth, and some of the tower guys here. And there's another picture of her with her co-pilot in here. And also, if many of you remember Dottie Anderson, she was one of our members. She also flew in that air race too, along with Marilyn Miller. Many of you remember Marilyn Miller. So anyway, on my first Air Race Classic, she also flew in that. And flew that.
Which one, Mark?
No, Edna Gardner White. She also flew that, and she also flew that Comanche 400. And what was so neat about her was that here she was with all this flying experience that she had, because she instructed World War II air pilots, fighter pilots. But here she would be sitting in the corner over there with this the shoes our grandmas used to wear, those shoes and everything. She'd be sitting over in the corner like that, knitting. All the rest of us were talking about and so forth. She'd be sitting there all by herself, knitting. She was the neatest person, so be sure, if you can, be sure to read this.
That was in AOBA.
No, it's in
No,
99.
it's in the 99. It's in our 99s. You all got this. So be sure and read about her, because she was one neat person. And that's all I've got to say.
Hey, I'm recording. Speak.
I got a rough start in my pilot training. I had a really good instructor, but
Yeah.
glad we didn't fly. I had a good instructor, but he was new. And where we were, they encouraged more of the fly before you learn all the stuff. It's hard to learn in the air, at least for me. So I got hooked up with Peg. This is a short version. And Peg's amazing. She worked with me, and we worked schedule-wise and everything. I got my private pilot's license. I'm super psyched about that. I do fly with CAP. I'm on a break right now, but I fly with CAP, so I do a lot of air crew with them. And I've learned a lot from both CAP and from Peg. And it's just been amazing to meet all the different people that are out there. encouraging, and they have these amazing stories that they share, and everyone's a little bit different, but then they're similar. There are some similarities, and it's just really awesome to see. And just all of you, just what all you guys have accomplished. It's inspiring to me at 53 to see what you guys have done. Okay, don't look at me in that tone of voice. But just that we can accomplish whatever we want if we want to, regardless of age. There are some things we can't do, like I want to do the helicopter pilot thing for the police department, but I love the fact that, I mean, Peg and I have a blast every time we go out and do something. And she puts me through the ringer, running me through stuff as far as the instrument stuff, but it's okay because we're having fun and learning and we're being safe. And you guys just inspire me to inspire others to do more, to get more women involved to do this kind of stuff.